Thank you for joining us wherever you are. This podcast episode is brought to you by the Old Ways Actual Play Team. This actual play uses the Old Gods of Appalachia rules by Monty Cook Games. This actual play is performed by adults and contains adult themes. We welcome you to our hollers and the depths beneath them, but take caution. For all content, including names, places, events, companies, and etc., which may bear resemblance to entities living or from places unknown, is strictly coincidental. My name is Michael Diamond, and for tonight's tale, I will be your game master. Thank you for joining us again on another episode of the Old Ways podcast. I am your storyteller or game master this evening, Michael Diamond. My pronouns are he, him, and we are going to debut for you Old Gods of Appalachia with a story straight out of East Tennessee. So before we get started, I'd like to thank you, the listener, and especially you, the Patreon supporter. If you've not had a chance to check out what we offer on Patreon, you can at patreon.com/theoldwayspodcast. Come and join us on YouTube and on Twitch, both spaces that we're in, and who knows where else we'll be in the near future. But that said, we have a fantastically fun and we'll just say family-oriented story this evening. And so we're going to do that by getting to character introductions and player introductions, which begin to my right.
I'm Bunny. My pronouns are she, her, and I play Ivy Holloway.
Excellent. And next to Bunny.
I'm Mare, she, her, and I play Clara Carr.
And last but most certainly not least.
This is Morgan. My pronouns are she, her. I'm playing Preacher Elijah Carr. His pronouns are he, him.
So we're going to raise the curtain tonight in Tennessee. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Old Gods of Appalachia, a couple of things to sort of level set you. We're going to be playing in the year 1907. This is a fictional year for this world, meaning that a lot of the things that might be going on in and around the United States aren't necessarily always occurring here. These are snapshots, little bits of story that happen in our lives. And so it's a fictional place. We'll talk about fictional cities, fictional people. And so we won't look too carefully at this with a historical lens. Besides, there's all sorts of things that just ain't right about these lands. And we'll get to that. So we're going to be using the Cipher system by Monty Cook Games. So as we go through and we talk through the story and we give you that wonderful narrative that you come to grow on with when it comes to the old ways, is we're also going to explain how rules get adjudicated. We won't do any sort of upfront stuff. With the stuff that happens at the table is how we'll work through the rules. But I'd like to give each of our players the opportunity to delve a little bit more into their characters, to explain who they are. And in the Cipher system, we're going to do that by just giving their sentence, which makes them up. So they are an adjective, noun, that verbs. And so I'd like to know, Bunny, what can you tell us about a little bit more about your character?
I'm a perceptive folk healer that cures what ails you.
That sounds fun. Nice. Very useful. Mare, how about your character?
I am a mystical bookwoman who crafts powerful objects.
And our preacher, Elijah.
Well, he's superstitious speaker that becomes the beast.
It just sounds so fantastic. So the three of you have been, for any number of reasons, called back to Tennessee from, we'll just say, far off places. It could be places north, it could be places south, potentially. I'm not sure where each one of you make up your lives at on a regular basis, but Tipton is the place that you're headed, because you are headed home. There's been a call that's been raised, letters have been put into the mail, carefully crafted sentences which have drawn you back for a family reunion. So Tipton, for those of you who've not had a chance to spend a little time in Tennessee, Tipton is a place that not a whole lot of people venture to. It's not big. In fact, there might be maybe about 1,000 folks that make up the core of Tipton. And that includes even the remote areas of the Blue Ridge Mountains. There's an awful lot to wonder, not like, wonder when it comes to Tipton. Because even the people who spend just a little time in Tipton know that something here just ain't right. Something's a little off. Now, whether it's the folks at the steel mill only working 2-3 days out of the week sometimes, or whether it is all that stuff that goes on at the denim factory, something's different. At least Tipton has the home. That home for the young is super important. And there isn't anything better than seeing those little kids and making sure that they have a place to stay. There's an awful lot of children that need help in Tipton. And the home is the perfect place. So one of the ways I'd like to see us open this would be on the road. Now, Mary, your character has to come home to Tipton. And unfortunately, very recently, there has been some interruptions on the rail lines. There have been a few strikes. There have been a few fights. And so train service has gotten a little irregular. And so you decided in your wisdom that maybe you'd get a wagon and a couple of horses and look to take up to get back home. I wonder, however, you're not coming back home alone, are you?
Nope. Clara is not coming home alone. In her journeys and her travels, she has met a number of people. She's met colleagues. She's met folks to help. Her sort of mental state is very much a help your neighbor kind of state. And your neighbor is wherever you are. So along the way, when you find others who match that like intention, you stick with them. So she's brought along a very close friend.
Yeah. I wonder if that friend might be here with us today.
I'm just glad that Clara will let me come along to meet her family since she's become like family to me. And let me expose my craft to her craft so that we can be better together than we ever were apart.
So I'm wondering, how'd the two of you meet?
Well, as I go from place to place, I meet different folks, and it's nice to find a friendly face among there. As a bookwoman, I go from one place, transporting books, usually to the other homes for the young, out and about throughout Appalachia. And occasionally, I'll come across, some interesting folks. Well, I have my knack for various things, different ways about me, different things that I've learned, but I've never been one to really muss or fuss with a scrape or two here and there. But as I wound up in one of these small towns, I met Ivy. And I was a little busted up, a little more banged up than usual, and she got all worried about these infections, and I was just a scratch, and it's just, that turns that color sometimes, and then I lay up for a bit, and then it's fine, but, she taught me some better ways.
Well, that sounds downright neighborly. But I have a feeling that you couldn't get too far terribly out of town without, say, a cousin that you've been doing a little work with, right? And so I'm imagining in the back of this wagon, there might be, perhaps, a Sunday morning preacher sleeping off something from Saturday night.
Most definitely. And as it bumps on the road, Elijah pokes his head out from underneath the hat. Clara, could you just slow down a little bit?
If we're going to make it in time, no, I cannot.
I'm going to need more of that juice.
You don't need any more of that juice. What you need is some water, perhaps. Ivy, is there any water back there for him?
Oh, there must be somewhere. Unless he drank it all, hoping it was something else. I'll look for it.
Now, the local wildlife and the trees, the fauna, all those things in front of you, pale in comparison to that rise that continues to approach on the road. You know, once you get a little farther north here, it'll all be downhill. Tipton sits at a little bit of a depth to some of the hills and mountains around it. It's recently improved some of the rail lines around, and if the steel mill, like your ma has talked about in her letter, is going to go full time, it's going to need those rail lines and those workers running. You get the sense that fall's going to come quick. You feel that in your bones, Clara. Fall is coming, and it's coming real soon.
Do I notice anything beyond just the changing of the leaves, or does anything particularly seem off to me as we're going through this area along the way?
As was mentioned, as this is home, well, the old home anyway, for Clara, Tipton's never been right. It's always been a little bit different. And you'd swear you'd seen, when you were younger, these women. You'd see them behind trees. You'd see them in groves and in some of the thicker forests in and around the steel mill. They'd all wear very similar clothing. They were all a little faint. Now, Ma called them haints, but you didn't think so necessarily. You thought, well, nobody's talked to them. Nobody knows what they know, so how do you know it's a haint? But it wouldn't be a day that ended in Y if your mama didn't tell you to stay away from them. You were a little too curious. And as it happened, before you left Tipton, to strike out to do what became part of your adult life, you ended up knocking around that steel mill a few times and found yourself a book, a real interesting one. And it's one you carry because, well, it's sort of like your first. And your first is special. And it's got an awful lot of real interesting thoughts on, well, the history of this place. And the fact that most of this geographical area was at one point part of Cherokee Nation. And there have been an awful lot of wise women in this space that listened to some of those old tales and learned a thing or two about what makes Tipton a little weird. And that's when the three of you start hearing the oncoming abrupt sound of a train behind you. And you know you're going to have to get a little clear, because if that train is coming next to this road, it's going to kick up an awful lot of rocks, and it's going to probably spook these horses. And so I think it might be fun for our first roll in the Cypher system to ask if any of the characters here have any familiarity with horse riding or wagon driving.
No.
Ivy does not.
Not anything in particular.
So that's okay, because if you don't have a skill for it, it doesn't mean that you're by any means out of luck when it comes to the Cypher system. It can be approached a couple of different ways as I see it. I think this is probably, given the speed of the train and this relative approach, I think this is probably a difficulty 3 challenge. And I would be willing to accept a might roll, in the sense that someone would stand up at the, on the seat of the wagon and literally pull the horses in a specific direction. Or I would be willing to allow an intellect roll against it to allow you to, say, talk to the horses in a real sweet way to get them to move.
Well, Clara's driving, so we'll go with an intellect roll in order to Siege, this is probably not the first time that she's come across this, but suddenly that train seemed to come out of nowhere this time. Must have been too focused on the wood line and the thoughts and memories of the visions and things I've seen in the past here. So she will make an intellect roll. Is there a way in this system for assists of any kind?
You have skills that you could potentially use. You could call into account the fact that you have horse and tack. You have, bit and bridle and whatnot. That could be an asset if you'd like to claim it as an asset.
Yeah, I'd like to claim the. I would like to claim like the tack that's on the horses and my knowledge of that, seeing as I've had to travel and had various mounts and whether on horseback or on cart. I would like to use my knowledge and my frequency of travel to lower the difficulty.
I think that's reasonable. So we'll take it from a difficulty 3 to a difficulty 2. So that means that your target number is 6. You need to roll over a 6 and a d20.
Oh, okay. That's a 17.
Okay. So you stand up on that front seat of the wagon and you grab the reins of your horses and you begin urging them to the right because you need to get away from that train that railroad track is just right next to the road. And you urge them over and urge them over. And so for you, Elijah, and you, Ivy, the wagon gets jostled big time. Boxes move, luggage moves around. You get hit in the head, Elijah, with like one of the bags that's packed back here. It doesn't do any actual damage, but it definitely wakes you up and probably assists you in the headache you already have from your lack of, well, let's say, spiritual connection. You move, and the horses move with you, and the train rolls on by. And while there's no roll for it, you can tell that train doesn't have a whole lot of people on it. Maybe just a couple faces out the window.
Oh, yeah. By the way, hold on, y'all.
Clara, I adore you, but little late for that. Little too late for that kind of a warning.
Oh, we're fine. We'll just wait for this thing to pass, and then, there shouldn't be another one for a while. Y'all right back there, Pastor?
Clara, maybe next time I ought to drive the horses.
Oh, you didn't offer earlier, so I figured you must not have been interested earlier.
I was recovering from a headache.
And how's that going for you right now?
I am right as rain.
Good. Do you want to take over then? Pastor Cousin?
Nope. You got to get a handle on it.
All right. Well, if you're sure, and she would start to jostle everybody back onto the road.
Yeah, once the horses know that they're going to have to move a couple of directions, if it's not abrupt, they'll move where they need to go, where you need them to go. You begin to crest the highest part of the hill, and you can see Tipton down at the bottom of this just slight bowl shape. You see the train having arrived at this location. It has arrived at the train station there in Tipton. Tipton is basically about 2 square miles. As you begin to arrive in Tipton proper, the city itself is surrounded on 3 sides. Pine and oak forests. There's a steep mountain ridge on its eastern side. You know that is the best view of town, is from this ridge. You have got memories, both of you, really. Elijah, you, and then you, Clara, you have memories of just wait until the sun is about to go down and that dying light sort of gleams off of the polished stone buildings. But the one thing that no one here can ignore is this cloud that's in the air over the city. Coal smoke. And as you arrive closer to town, everything stinks of sulfur, decay. But you arrive back home. And the train station, to its credit, is bustling with people coming and going. Home, the homestead for the Carr family and, well, for the Rourkes at this point, the other side of the family, is a little further north. So you'll ease that wagon further north and cut through town. But moving through Tipton, it sort of makes you a little bit homesick. There's a lot of the same people doing very similar things. It's probably been, I don't know, Clara, how long has it been since you've been home?
Oh, I'd say maybe over 5 years. Probably even closer to 8.
Okay.
Time's hard to tell.
It certainly can be. Especially when you're out having all sorts of different adventures and learning new things and being away from this place. For newcomers, Ivy, this looks like a cozy little mountain town. There's not a ton of buildings here. There's, 2-3 score, but reasonably sized general store. There's clearly a movement of coal here in this town. That's got to be one of the things that this town does more often than not. The steel mill is set off, but the tracks that lead in and out of there are pretty well worn. You also see that there's purple clothes. There's a couple people wearing not blue denim, but purple.
In a small hall like this? Interesting.
Yeah, it's quite striking.
Yeah, that's unusual.
So what would catch your eye for sure is that there is and I don't want to make any judgments, but there's a woman who's working outside of one of the local establishments here, and she looks to be probably mid-30s, but she is wearing denim pants, which is very forward-thinking, we'll just say, probably for this area. And her pants are denim. They're mostly blue, but there are these streaks of both purple and red in them that move vertically. And the preacher amongst you probably thinks that it's likely a sin to wear them.
But I still nod my hat at her and hello as we pass by. Like, hello.
You luckily do not raise her perceptions enough.
Figures.
Hey, you quit. You watch where your eyes are, okay? Don't go looking.
Listen, don't you be minding me back here. You better be facing the front.
You better watch your eyes there, Pastor Cousin. These folks.
So you would know, the two of you would probably have a good idea of Tipton Denim, King Denim is the business. They have tinted blue or reddish purple. Nobody knows why. After she helps this person sort of load their wagon, she moves down the shop line. But it's just something that you pick out. And you head up further north to the family homestead. So for you, home is a dusty, slightly rocky road that leads into a bunch of really mature oaks. It is, frankly, probably one of the oldest homes that was established here. Way back from, even back further than your papa, who's still alive, and your granny, Sarah. Well, you know her name is Sarah, but you would never call her that because she's granny. She's also a whiz in the kitchen, and she makes probably the best blackberry pie you've ever had. Like, you can taste it in your mouth from 8 years ago. It's that good. While your papa in general has the seat at the end of the table, the real power in the Rourke family comes from your granny. What she says goes. And your papa is more of sort of not an enforcer, but if there's kids mess around at the table, right, it is your papa that says something to him because granny has looked at him. That's the pecking order. He's the type that goes to work, even at his age, collects his pay and delivers it to her because she manages everything. It's a fairly big house by comparison. So there's probably 4 bedrooms here. It'll be all double and triple stacked when it comes to the reunion. And as you get close to home, probably just after 2 o'clock or so, just by looking at the sun, you can tell that there's probably an awful lot of people already here because of the mess of kids that's running around in the yard.
Well, feels like a lifetime ago since I walked these roads.
That it does. Some things don't change, but a lot also seems to. I don't know. There's something different. But then again, it isn't. I don't know. And she just keeps urging the cart horse further on. That's a lot of kids. That's like a lot of kids.
Yeah, if you didn't know it any better, your Aunt Maggie's probably got 2 new children. Her husband, James, Uncle Jimmy, as sometimes folks will call him, he makes a batch of probably some fairly potent moonshine. That is white mule that he makes. And you are certain that he probably has a jug or 2 with him at this family reunion.
I know where I'm going.
You arrive at the house.
Ivy's hand is going to gently brush against Clara's, and she's going to say quietly, hopefully too quiet for the preacher, I can't wait for you to show me some of these old roads,
Oh, there's plenty of old roads around here. Older than this town and the buildings and everything here. I can't wait. But first, we gotta unload this cart. And go on with all the hugging and the kissing and all that. But don't worry. I'll introduce you to everybody I know.
Sounds good, Clara. Sounds good.
Yeah, so disembarking or getting off the wagon, tying up the horses is fairly easy. There's a big bow-shaped space when it comes to the spot in front of the house, so the wagon can easily get turned around if it needs to. And there are 2 or 3 other houses that are, quote, in the area, and you'd know them. You probably would know some of the families they're in. But by say in the area, I mean, several miles down the road, because there's a lot of farming that goes on here and that sort of thing. A lot of woodworking, sawmills, that type of location. Your paw comes out the front door. You hear the screen door groan and then slam shut from that spring actuator it has on it. And you see him in what is the image of your father that you still have probably burned in your mind, which is a man who has got bib overalls on. He's got a dark shirt on underneath of it. The sleeves are pulled up past his elbows. His hands have a lifetime of work that has been put into them. As far as his occupation has sort of moved a few times here. He's done some farming, he's done some mining, he has done some work at the mill. The last time you knew he was working at the steel mill. He steps out and sees you, Clara, and sees you, Elijah. Now, Elijah, you'd be familiar as a cousin with who this is, at least you think. The last time you were in town, Clara, you didn't know he was wearing glasses. He's wearing glasses now. So he's got spectacles on, and you can see like the rim of dirt on his face because clearly he's been into something. And he waves. Hey, you made it! You hear his voice from across the yard.
Yeah, of course, Pa. Hey, what? Look at you. And she makes a gesture towards the glasses.
He moves out towards the wagon, and that's really the first time that you see him not walk, but amble. You see that he struggles to walk upright. His back is a little bent now, but he makes good time over to you. It's just the years have now begun to catch up with him. He's full of love and hugs you tight when he gets close to you.
Clara goes in and returns the hug, really clinging in, breathing in the smell of him, the soot and the dirt and the sweat and just everything that smells like home. Trying to squeeze 8 years of not being there into that hug.
You hear what sounds like a pop from his back. Ooh.
Oh, well, sorry.
No, that was a good one. I think that worked. Oh, man.
Oh, all right. Well,
It got me working on one of those lower machines.
and she moves just kind of to tuck herself up under his arm like it's a wing.
Mhm.
Have to just be there and be close to her paw again, but also just to kind of see how much he is supporting and ambling there.
Your father's still got a fair amount of strength in his bones, you figure. But whatever he's doing for work now must be wringing him out dry every night. You don't feel like you have to support him when you walk, which is sort of a blessing. You're not as tall as he is yet, but if he keeps working someplace where he's got to stoop over all the time, you're going to catch up real quick.
Oh, Pa, it's so good to see you again. And look who we found here on the way. You remember Cousin Elijah, or I'm sorry, Pastor Elijah.
He turns to you, nods. Yes, of course. I heard he'd taken to preaching. That's gospel's good for everyone to hear, don't you think?
I do, Uncle Joseph, and I jump out and shake his hand, offer my hand out.
Yeah, he shakes your hand. So when he shakes your hand, Elijah, it's like shaking a vice grip. His hands aren't very large per se, but they feel like just absolute iron clamps when you shake his hand. He doesn't try to show how strong he is, but just you get that feeling from this is a man who works with his hands daily, and he's got all those little intricate hand muscles, and you can see the pretty clear delineation in his forearms and in the backs of his hands.
Pa, and this is my good friend Ivy Holloway.
Well, it's very nice to meet you, sir.
Oh, nice to meet you too, ma'am. How'd y'all meet?
Well, Ivy here knows a little bit, a thing or two about medicine. You know, all the stuff I couldn't cram into my head, and just, she's just amazing with it.
Well, it'll be real useful around here.
If you don't mind my saying, sir, I watched you walk over. I might actually be able to help if your back's bothering you.
Oh, you watch it, but you watch it happen before it happens, Ivy. You watch him come up with the reason why he doesn't need help. You've seen this because his daughter does the same thing. I wouldn't want to put you out of trouble. I'm sure the back will be just perfect fine. I got a hot water bottle inside. I'll be all right.
All right, sir. Well, if you change your mind, you just let me know.
Sure. Why don't you come in the house, bring your stuff, and I'll have one of the boys come get your bags and whatnot. I got a spot for you, preacher. It's out back in one of the sheds there, and then Clara, you and I guess Ivy can take one of the rooms here.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Man, how many are we expecting here? That's a lot already.
Right now? Well, let's see here. He starts counting on his fingers, and you can tell that, like, mathematics maybe wasn't his top subject in class. 2, 4, 7, 11. And that'll be... it'd probably be 20 of us or so.
Does it look like 20 of us or so, or does it look like we're well north of that?
No, it doesn't look like 20. Well, the kids, there's got to be at least 10 kids out here.
Uh-huh.
And that also does not account for any children that might be inside, strapped to their mama's, hips. So you could be well north of 20. Your father says, Mary ain't here yet, but I'm sure she'll be along. Mary is your 25, 28-ish or so year old sister who is not married and has no children. While there isn't necessarily anything that's spoken in the open about her life choices, when people talk about Mary, it's fairly clear that the family sort of wishes she had married about, a decade ago.
Mm-hmm. That's relatable.
Yeah.
Well, what's she been up to? Where's she at?
She's not far from here. She is staying down in Paso Branch. She's being a school teacher.
Oh, that's just like her. She was always trying to tell me all the ways I was wrong, all the time.
And she's definitely good at it. Your mom and I wish she'd find her place.
Well, it's never actually too late,
Oh, I know. He turns around and heads back towards the house. He gets to the door and swings it open. You guys are, all of you are with, him, and you can hear him sort of yell into the house, "Mama, they home!" And that is when you hear your mother, Hannah Ann Carr, Rourke's voice, speak up from the kitchen. "There's more than enough space. Just come on in and find a place to sit. We'll be with you in a minute. Coffee's on."
Hi, Mama.
You hear something drop. You hear a couple of what you think are probably forks or utensils drop. And your mother appears in the doorway of the kitchen. And she is like beaming with pride. And she squeals a little and like hustles over and grabs you. And you get what you gave your father in return. Like you get the full breath of your mother's 8 years of waiting to hug you love try to consume you.
Clara squeezes right back, puts all that back, even makes a little, "Oh, it's so good to see you too."
You hear your back pop.
"Oh, it's so good to see you too. I can't believe. Look at this. It looks just how I left it. I mean, there's too many people here right now, but it's still."
Oh, tell me. Tell me all about it. Yeah, no, Daddy put a new leaf into the table, so it'll be a little wider.
Oh, okay.
This time. So we've got some other chairs and, Elijah, how did you get here?
Well, Clara was so kind to pick me up on the way.
Well, I am happy to see you. We'll have a proper preacher to bless all our meals.
Isn't that what they taught you? Is that like lesson number 1? Preaching 101, how to bless a meal?
I don't know if there's any like 101, but...
Well, we should have some spots out back. We working on one of the sheds to put in a few extra beds for all the folks here.
Not that I'm not appreciative, Aunt, but are any of the children going to be staying out there, or are they all in the house?
I suppose we haven't really rightly worked that out just yet. You're free to sort things out if you like.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mama, this is Ivy. This is Ivy Holloway.
Oh, it's nice to meet you. Her mother extends a hand.
Ivy extends a hand back, looking almost as if she wanted to hug her instead, but goes through the handshake. "Ma'am, your daughter is one of the dearest people to me. I am so grateful for your hospitality welcoming me into your home on this trip of hers."
Well, I'm glad she has a couple people with her on this trip. Some of the roads have not been kind. And Tipton's, I don't know, it's felt a little strange lately. So I'm glad she's had somebody. We had a neighbor down the way lost a horse. And I think it was stolen.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, it's just not the way we like to. I don't like to think about Tipton like that, but let me get you some coffee. There's also some lemonade I made.
Well, thank you kindly. Lemonade sounds lovely after a ride like that.
Your mother fawns over the three of you for probably a good 15 or 20 minutes until you are settled. You've got something to drink in front of you. You've been offered probably 2 different types of food just to make sure. She complains that you look a little skinny and that you need to take better care of yourself. What is this cut? Where did you get this bruise? That sort of thing.
Oh, I definitely take coffee. Like, with all the sugar.
The coffee here is reasonably strong. It's nothing overpowering. It looks like it's just made right there on the stove. They have a little pot that makes it. You all get the whirlwind experience that is 9 children running through the house, which your mother is having none of. So they get pretty quickly instructed to head back outside, run around the fields. She says stuff like, there's a lot of real sturdy trees out there that everybody can climb and get all that energy right out of you.
Clara leans over to Ivy and says, you may want to get a couple splints out. It happens every time.
Shortly after your arrival, there is the arrival of your Granny and Pawpaw. They come off of a wagon and being led by what looks like maybe your uncle. Maybe he went and picked them up. You're not sure. Last you knew, they used to live here with your parents. You're not sure why they don't anymore. Your granny is, as ever, full of energy, even at her more advanced age. She's eager to be introduced to your friends and to exchange pleasantries. Your papa doesn't come in the house. He goes straight out to the yard where it looks like he and your father are preparing some type of meal area. Like they're pulling picnic tables together and they're cutting wood and that sort of thing. Your granny's probably all of about 5 feet tall. She has really straight, like yellow, blonde, white hair. And interestingly enough for you as well, Ivy, you get a sense from Granny. You get this sort of strange, sort of tingly feeling when she's in the room. Her hair is pretty well thick and braided, and it goes down basically to the middle of her back. She's also not someone who wears a ton of jewelry per se. It doesn't look like any of the family are fairly heavy into the Rourke family or fairly into jewelry. But there are a couple pieces on her that you sort of wonder their origins and or their meanings. She pulls you aside, Clara, and into like the dining room, living room area and has you sit down. The rest are, of course, welcome to join you. But she says to you, I want to hear about where you been, what you seen.
Oh, I've been all over, Granny. I've been all over, been up and down the Appalachian Trail, going from town to town. I've had my hands on more books going to and fro than I've ever thought I would in my lifetime. And she would, if she's in the same room as some of her bags, go over to some of the books that are there and start pulling some of them out just to show her things, any of them that have the illustrations, and would start talking on, And in my travels, I met some good friends. This is Ivy.
A pleasure, ma'am.
Indeed. She seems to give you more than like a once over.
I take that time to do it back.
Not in a rude way. You can tell that Granny has a very discerning eye. You would know, given your upbringing. You get a lot of similar feels from Clara's Granny. There's she's got some juice.
Got it.
She can make things happen if need be.
Ivy, I swear everything you've ever heard me talk about, everything I've ever learned, I learned sitting right here at Granny's knee, right in this house. Yeah, Granny, where were you right before you got here?
Oh, she sort of looks for just a second towards the kitchen and then turns back to the table. We had to go back into town for a couple of things. Your papa has, he had to take a place that was a little closer towards the steel mill. He's been doing some work there on account of these trouble with keeping workers. He's a man of experience, and the mill understands that. And so instead of, getting up and having to ride or pull wagon miles just to get to work, he's taking the place a little closer.
Ah. I didn't realize things were so tough that he would have to go back over to the mill.
She sort of nods, and there's a feeling of acceptance. So this is someone who's lived through a lot of really tough things. Your granny lived through the Civil War, like as a young child, and it has been a difficult several decades. Tipton has had a regular problem with the economy here. People come in and they work, and then they realize there's not a whole lot to do in Tipton other than just kind of work and drink and exist. And so people go to places that have more culture or more things that they can spend their money on. Tipton is a little town that never really got the chance to be big. Granny says, well, it's been a tough couple of years, but we will make it. We will make it.
We always do.
You bet. And in just like the ease of motion that would not be, it sort of belies her frame. She reaches and grabs for you, Elijah. Like she grabs your wrist, and she looks you dead in the eyes with these two hazel orbs. And she says, who you praying to, Elijah?
Well, Granny, you...
Don't you lie to me, boy. I don't want to hear it past your lips. You tell me the truth right now.
No one. No one, Granny. I'm praying to no one.
We're going to fix that. You and me. We'll talk later tonight. We'll fix that.
Yes, ma'am.
She lets go of your wrist. You can see the imprint of her fingers, like on your flesh.
Yeah, I'm rubbing it. Because it hurts.
She gets up and heads into the kitchen.
Clara has a slow look over to Elijah.
Don't. Cousin, I don't even want to hear it out of your lips.
I wasn't going to say a thing. I wasn't going to say anything. I was just surprised that happened as quick as it did.
You hear outside, all of you do. You hear raised voices. Male voices. It is not. It is too. You hear an argument start. It is better and stronger. Now, to the Carr family, this is an old argument you've heard before, Clara. The differences between your Uncle Jimmy and his white mule and Uncle John and his corn liquor. And they like to get to, well, arguing. They have a row a little bit about whose is better. And when your mother appears back in the dining room doorway, she says, "We all get out there and figure this out, please. I can't have them fighting before dinner."
Clara pats Elijah twice on the back.
I'll handle this. And go out the front door. Gentlemen, what are we arguing about here? Let me try your wares.
So, set before you as you exit the house and head to the right, you see that there's a large picnic table area that's been set up. Benches, a couple of different lanterns, probably for later. It's under a big, big oak tree. It's got to be the family tree, you figure. On either side of the table, there are two men, one of whom you know fairly well, and that would be Uncle Jimmy, as he's called. He is the progenitor of White Mule. He is arguing with another man on the other side of the table, and they are sort of pushing these enormous jugs back and forth to try to get the center position on the main table, which is sort of like the place of honor. And, well, it isn't going very well.
I'd like to utilize my persuasion skill, if possible.
Okay. What would you like to persuade them to do?
That both of their fine beverages are the best, and they should both share the middle spot on the table.
Okay. So I think that this is going to be a difficulty 4 challenge, and I'll explain why, because I think it's important. You are basically trying to get them to agree that both of them are winners. The issue there is that they are at loggerheads as to which one is the best. They believe there can only be a single winner. The additional complication, the reason why it's difficulty 4, is because they are both perhaps, just perhaps, they have decided to imbibe said moonshine to prove that it is the best. So perhaps your targets are a little bit intoxicated. Now, you have the ability to potentially change that difficulty number by using skills or effort or all sorts of different stuff. What do you think Elijah would do to help calm them down? Is there anything you'd like to bring to the table?
So I guess a question, because my skilled talking, which is a special ability, which is how I get the persuasion skill. Can you, for the listeners at home and me, explain what enabler means?
So some special abilities allow you to perform a familiar action, one that you can already do, but they allow you to do it in a different way. For example, the ability might let you wear heavy armor to reduce the difficulty of a speed defense roll, or it might add 2 points of green damage to your weapon damage. These abilities are called enablers. So using one of these abilities is not considered an action, meaning that if we were in rounds of combat, it would not cost you an action to use it. It sort of happens as another part of your action. If a special ability is an enabler, the end of the ability's description will say enabler to remind you, hey, this doesn't cost me anything to do. It just enables me to do something.
Got it. All right. So then I'll still use my skilled talking ability, and within that, the persuasion.
So it's difficulty 4, which means we multiply all difficulty numbers by 3. And so it'd be 12 or higher on your die. But if you're going to use your persuasion skill, then that will drop it by 1 to 3. And so your difficulty to roll over would be 9.
Wonderful. And I get a 19.
Oh, wow. Okay. So 19 is a minor effect. And so when we talk about rolls in the Cypher system, there's a list of things that you have the ability to do. And there's things that happen when you roll the dice and when you get. So if a character rolls a natural 1, a 17, an 18, a 19, or a 20, special rules are going to come into play. And so a 19 is a minor effect. And so it's not an attack roll. The PC gets a minor effect in addition to the normal results of the task. So the result of the task would normally be you're going to quell the 2. I am going to say that the way you do that is thus. You, in your role as a preacher, you stand on the authority of what you say. And what you said before the roll was that you were going to assure them that they were both first prize winners. And you prove it by ingesting both of the alcohols in front of them. You take a very long draw from each of those jugs, and it tastes like pure gasoline. Fumes probably come out of your mouth after drinking them. And both of the uncles are sort of in awe. You get a lot of respect from the men around the table, including Clara's paw and her pawpaw as well. A man of very few words, but so the verbal altercation, the argument sort of dies right there in the pit of your stomach as you ingest multiple alcoholic beverages at once.
So who is Uncle Jimmy arguing with?
He's arguing with Uncle John. So this would be on the Carr side, John Carr.
Listen here, gentlemen. This is the finest moonshine that I've ever tasted. Both of them. We're going to just set these here things in the middle of the table so everyone can partake in this wonderful, wonderful concoction.
Yeah, they seem to accept your words. You get a chance and an opportunity afterwards, Elijah, to get a look at where you're going to be staying this evening. The shed is, well, it really is a shed. It is home to, frankly, just the dog and maybe a mule. But the thing that the shed has is a fantastic view. It might have a little bit of a leaky roof. Hopefully weather will hold. But you get a view of some of the mountains and foothills beyond it. And it's fairly pretty. There are several, you count 6, smaller beds in this space. And so, as it stands right now, it does look like you would be bunking with some smaller kids. Of course, you want to try to radically change that.
I'll just drink enough to fall asleep quickly.
Fair enough. Supper time comes for everybody. And the Rourke family and extended family and guests are invited to the long table outside the family oak tree in a really pretty evening meal that begins to happen just about as the sun starts to go down. Several of the family members have tied these tiny wooden and steel, what look like pigtails or curls to the sides of the tree, which hold candles. And you get this full-on sort of radiant ambiance that begins to thrum. The earth feels right here. And each one of those candles is like a little pinpoint of light. And what it does is it allows you to not have big, full lanterns, oil lanterns on the table. It's like having a little bit of the star field just a little closer as the meal gets started. But before the meal starts, Elijah, they invite you to say a prayer for the meal and bless it. And all eyes turn to you.
Wonderful. Bows his head and lifts his hands. We thank you, O Lord, for what's laid before us. Thank you, O Lord, for what laid before us, the bounty of the earth and the sweat of our kin. This table blessed by the hands now gone, and the soil that remains in their name. How the Lord blesses this family going forward and always as we sit down to eat.
Fabulous. So the meal is highlighted by more than a few of, we'll just call, family favorites. So you have probably a handful of favorite dishes when it comes to what you were hoping to come home to. Your mother has made one of her classics, right? And one of those classics that she always makes when it comes to big family mealtime is chicken fried steak. It is something that will absolutely set you where you need to be. There's a lot of root vegetables here. This is all down home food, right? So it's lots of breads. There's banana pudding. There's kilt lettuce and onions. Of course, there's fresh corn. And then your granny made chicken and dumpling soup, which of course is a crowd pleaser. But the dinner lasts for a good, hour and a half or so. You get to catch up with a lot of the different family members. You get to see Sarah and John. So your Uncle John Carr, the guy that makes the corn liquor, moonshine, his wife, Sarah. They've got a couple of kids there, and they do a rough head count, just, making sure everybody's here, everybody's counted for. And that eventually draws a little concern. And you start to see Sarah look around, and you start to hear her call out. She stands up from the table and she says, Charlotte? Charlotte? You can hear her voice, and she gets up from the table. You hear your Uncle John say, hey, sorry, she's probably just in the house. And you get this sense from her. You see this feeling on her face like things are not okay, like that something is wrong. And your granny is the first person to speak up to her. And she says, Sarah, what's wrong? And she says, I don't know. Where's Charlotte? Who's seen Charlotte? And we go about the table. The kids say, we were playing out in the field today. Everything was fine. We were over here. We were over there. And she was with us. And I haven't seen her since, just after lunch. And boy, that's been a handful of hours now. And slowly but surely, the Rourke family gets real concerned. People get up from their table. They start grabbing lanterns. And you feel it. You probably feel it in the pit of your stomach. There's a missing kid. Where's Charlotte? So I'm going to take that opportunity to call our episode to a close. And perhaps we'll have a new investigation next time. So thank you all for our first dip our toe in Old Gods of Appalachia. I hope you're enjoying our version of East Tennessee. And we'll be back to Tipton next time.